So let me tell you about offshore wind. So I'm Tom Bjorloff. I'm a retired energy consultant and businessman, and I'm here to give a little bit of a background and an understanding of what's going on with offshore wind in New York and on Long Island. It's a huge project that's been started by the state, by the governor, and there is a major plan for the development of offshore wind. And it's for a good reason. The state is trying to achieve 50% renewable energy by 2030. That's a tough objective, and they need a lot of offshore wind to do that. The proceedings in New York State are open. There is a lot of participation, a lot of discussion, and so on. And they're proceeding in a reasonable way. Long Island is also going to participate in this push towards offshore wind, and the Long Island Power Authority and PSEG, who is their manager, have actually entered into a contract to build an offshore farm actually south of Martha's Vineyard. It's a pretty small project compared to the rest of things going on. Let me give you an idea. Here's what things looked like just about a month ago, 3 weeks ago. And you can see on this chart that there is development up in the Massachusetts area, there's development down by New Jersey, and there's really only one major project in New York waters, in the New York Bight. That project, by the way, was auctioned by BOEM, which is the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and it was won by a Norwegian company. Statoil is a government-owned company. It's actually a petroleum developer, oil developer, that is switching into renewable energy. It's an interesting auction. Statoil defeated New York State. They were bidding against the state, and they won the contract. So go figure that. So you say, well, that doesn't look so bad. Well, a couple of weeks ago, BOEM, the federal ocean energy people, open up a whole raft of new areas for development of offshore. And here's their map. It shows massive potential for development. People would probably be a little shocked seeing the amount of ocean that is going to be, or may be, it's not determined yet, may be converted into wind farms, but it's for a good purpose. So let's talk about Long Island. Long Island, when it comes to energy, is not part of Greater New York. It's separate. It's run by a separate utility. It's essentially a state-owned utility that does things their own way. And one of the problems is transparency. When LIPA and PSEG started this process, they did it under a lot of secrecy. It went so far as they required elected officials on the South Fork to sign non-disclosure agreements. They then went through a bid process and awarded a bid, and many people have asked to see how they selected the winner. What was the process, and what were the decision data for that? We have not been allowed to see it. Then they entered into a contract with a company called Deepwater Wind. It's a credible new startup, probably a great company. However, most of the contract is secret. We don't even know the pricing. And this is totally unacceptable that at this time and age we are actually proceeding with utility procurements that are kept from public view. The ratepayers pay all the bills for LIPA, but don't have much insight in what's going on. I would like to see the process slow down. I would like to see normal state procedures like Article 7, which is normally what has to be called in to be used for permitting this kind of thing, both environmentally and from an energy perspective. The governor basically stated that we need to get massive economies of scale. That will drive the price down. This is what happened in Europe. So if we invest heavily in offshore wind, if we obviously also have to take into account the fishermen and their interest, but if we invest heavily, the price will go down and we'll benefit from that. As far as we can tell, however, from the contract that Lightby has entered with Deepwater Wind, that contract is a fixed. It's a take everything they produce, it's at a fixed price, and the price goes up over time. That's totally contrary to what the governor's intent is. The idea of making massive investment is to get the cost curve to decline. But it appears that the contract with Deepwater prevents us, if we make that investment, from deriving the benefit of a declining price curve. So this is a big deal. The other one, obvious is that there's our massive fisheries and fishermen's interests that are involved in this, that are put at risk. And one of the problems I see at the fishermen are not really at the table. I think they should be at the table. I think there will be much less conflict in a cooperative, productive task force that moves this forward. We're going to do a lot of offshore wind, but there are good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. They did this in Europe. They've been doing it for 20, 25 years. They have learned a lot. We shouldn't start where the Europeans were 20 years ago.
Hi, my name is Rachel Gruzen, and I'm an environmental planner, and I live here in Amagansett. Growing up running around the beaches here and in the dunes, from a very young age I had an appreciation for the very special place in which we live, and for that reason I decided to get an undergraduate degree and a graduate degree in environmental management, both from Yale University. So I've been studying changes to our environment for decades, and I understand the importance of addressing climate change. It's critical that we take action now. But with that said, we need good planning process, and we need to recognize the importance of stakeholder engagement, due planning process, and following best management practices for any type of development project. The key to protecting the environment is good, sustainable design that responds to the design problems at hand and isn't reactionary. Fortunately, the climate change roof has been on fire for over 40 years, and the best path forward right now is to be very conscientious about every step that we take to make improvements to how we generate energy and how we responsibly develop our shore, our near-shore environment, and our ocean environment. So on this particular project at hand, what I've observed from the beginning, when the trustees started having their first public planning sessions, was that there just seemed to be people in the room missing. It seemed that when we asked questions of the panelists, it was the developer responding and giving us answers. And it started to become clear that we have areas in which we could be improving this process, doing the right thing for the environment, and mitigating climate change seems to be unfairly pitched against due planning process, against fully understanding the environmental implications, against the economic and social justice issues of what communities are going to be greatly impacted by this, whether it's the commercial fishermen, whether it's shipping channels or recreational users, sailors, or the mammals, the sea creatures, and the fish themselves. We're essentially taking information on the impacts of electromagnetic frequency. We're taking information on that from the developer. So with all these different issues of potential stakeholder conflict, of unknown impacts in the intertidal zone or the nearshore environment, it just seems imperative that we add more science to this process, and we at least have a platform on which we as a community talk about these issues comprehensively. And with that, we're not going to be the first to do it, because Rhode Island has been doing this for years. And they have a Rhode Island Ocean Special Area Management Plan. In 2008, they started this process because they had the exact same problems and questions that we had here, with all these new uses for the intertidal and nearshore environment and offshore. But if that was state jurisdiction, they at least recognized that activities going on in state and federal waters would be impacting communities on land. So ocean SAMP process-based issues. The community said there are a bunch of issues. Does this sound familiar? This is a done deal since the developer of the wind farm was selected and sites were already identified. The developer will have more access to information than the public. Stakeholders aren't going to have any influence over siting or any other regulations. Does this sound familiar? So there's a way of doing this, and there's a way of doing it right, and we can start the process. You can do 2 years of studies, 2 years of stakeholder outreach meetings, 2 years of having ombudsmen in the room. You don't go to the developer for information on environmental impacts. I think ultimately we have to make changes in how we generate energy. We also have to make changes in how we consume energy on land. In an ideal scenario, and this might be a little idealist of me, we would be adding wind turbines while we decommission fossil fuel power plants on land, and we're not doing that on this project. I don't want to see us developing the ocean marine environment because it's essentially expanding our human footprint, and I don't see that we've done enough onshore to mitigate our footprint. And I also don't think that we've done enough onshore in planning this out to mitigate whatever wind development we do in our oceans. That particularly irks me that this early in the planning process we're talking about the price tag on our natural resources. For me personally, that just, it really doesn't sit well with me that we have not even had one public stakeholder meeting on this on the town level. The trustees have done an excellent job of doing that for a long time now, but we haven't had one town project, one town public hearing on this as of yet, and we're talking already about accepting a community benefits package from the developer.
Hi, I'm Rick Drew from the East Hampton Town Trustees. I'm down here with my fellow trustee Dell Cullum, visiting the proposed landing site of the Deepwater Wind high voltage transmission cable that's part of the Deepwater Wind South Fork wind farm project. Beach Lane is a really special place for me. My daughters come down here to practice yoga and go surfing. My wife likes to come down here and sunbathe and read books and go for long walks on the beach with her friends. And in the fall, I like to come down here and go surf casting. And when the surf's good, I like to come down here and go paddle surfing. So it's kind of like our family's go-to ocean beach. It's the closest one to our house. It's kind of quiet and off the beaten path. Just a really beautiful place to come and hang out. You know, we've all been very concerned about the environmental impacts of the Deepwater Wind Farm. And with this high energy cable, high voltage cable coming ashore here, we've really wanted the town to do a deep dive into the impacts on the community, on the environment, and on the fish migration of bait fish, striped bass, bluefish, weakfish. And this is all taking place very quickly, and I think we're concerned that we might be rushing. So I think it's time for us to take a break and really take a harder look at the environmental impacts of the project. When we talk about cost, this could be the most expensive energy project in the world. Right now it's listed with the State Controller's Office at $1.6 billion. So that's going to be $100 million a turbine. They're proposing 15 windmill turbines offshore, and you have $1.6 billion in cost. $100 million a turbine is completely outrageous. Who's going to pay for this? The ratepayers are. So we're making a decision not only on behalf of the East Hampton town residents, but all ratepayers on Long Island. And I think we feel this is a really big responsibility, and we need to understand the cost elements of this project much more thoroughly. The other thing that troubles me is we've met with the Deepwater Wind Farm team for over a year, and we gave them a lot of feedback, and when they issued their report to the town, they didn't include any of our comments or any of the input from the stakeholders of our community. And that's really troubling because they've represented from day one they wanted to focus on transparency and accountancy. And we're just not seeing it. So we think it's time maybe, at least personally, I feel that it's, time for a timeout. Let's take a harder look and really understand this project before we move forward.
Hi, I'm Manny Vilar, and I'm the founding Police Benevolent Association president, representing the New York State Environmental Conservation Police, the New York State Forest Rangers, the New York State Park Police, and the New York State University Police. I have a 34-year career in law enforcement, with the last 20 years in government affairs on the union side. I understand environmental protection. That's my job. So I have a long career in environmental protection. We understand that there is environmentalism and conservationism. Environmentalism without conservationism is not a science. It's a political ideology. You must have the two together, married together, and they work together uniformly as a science. The desire for clean energy is a very positive and worthwhile cause, but it cannot be done at the expense of the community that's impacted, nor can it be done at the expense of creating greater environmental damage. There needs to be a balance. That's conservationism. That's what a conservationist does. Deepwater Wind has situated itself as a clean energy that will have zero environmental impact. That's not true. You cannot build these structures on Cox's Ledge and not have an environmental impact. Whether it's marine mammals, it's marine fisheries, there's going to be an impact, an environmental impact below the waterline. We've all heard about the avian impact and bird kills with the fan blades, but there's very little discussion about the actual environmental impact beyond the waterline. That's what our commercial fishermen who live off of the sea, the biggest conservationists I have ever known have been the commercial fishermen. Commercial fishermen, their lives depend on a healthy, sufficient livestock and supply of seafood. Without seafood, their industry doesn't exist and their way of life doesn't exist. So they're very, very sensitive to the environmental needs and things that will impact the environment. We need to take a serious, honest look. There needs to be scientific studies. We need to have a database with some empirical information so we truly understand where we're coming from and where we're going. Potentially, Deepwater Wind could wipe out our commercial fishing industry, could have irreparable long-term harm on our underwater environment. We as a community in East Hampton depend, our tourism dollars, our tourism industry, our community depends on our beautiful, pristine environment. Our beaches, our fishing, our trails, our hiking, these are all integral aspects of what makes East Hampton such a beautiful place. We need to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these offshore windmills will not have a catastrophic environmental impact on our environment. And that is just conservationism. It's nothing radical. It's just plain, good old-fashioned Teddy Roosevelt conservationism. We shouldn't be rushing into a project that's being funded by GE Financial, Citibank, and D.E. Shaw. Last thing I knew about these companies, they were there to make a profit. A big profit. PSE&G is not an electric company. They're an electrical transmission company. They're going to make tremendous revenue over upgrades and cabling and everything that goes along with the support, the on-land support to transport this energy. I would caution everybody, be careful what you ask for, you may get it.
This is Larry Penny. I used to work in the town of East Hampton, Environmental Protection Director, head of the Natural Resource Department. I have a problem with these offshore windmills, or offshore turbines, I guess you'd call them. I've always had a problem thinking about anything going into our beautiful Atlantic Ocean that really shouldn't belong there. wind turbines are okay on land. People don't like to look at them maybe, but at least when the birds are hit by the blades, you can pick up the birds in the morning and count them. But out in the ocean, the birds disappear, and there are a lot of birds that fly in this flyway where they want to put the wind turbines. There are gannets, there are mures, there are shearwaters, there are ospreys, there are a whole bunch of birds, and not all of them fly during the day, but even so, during the day is dangerous for any birds flying around these giant, what New York Times calls this monster wind turbines, you know. The fishermen have some problems, but I can respect the fishermen. They've been here for much longer than the people who made the wind turbines. I really also respect the whales, the other marine mammals, the dolphins and so forth, the sharks, the fish. All of these, this is their playground, this is their migration ground, this is where a lot of them spawn. And you know that there are only, of the 400 or so Atlantic right whales, only about 17 or 18 of them breed up and off our Atlantic coast. And in fact, this used to be the place for the right whale. Not a single right whale baby came from those 400 whales last year, so the right whales are in terrible situation. Why not put these damn things on land, and why not use solar, which is so much more available and so much cheaper? So I would say let's not have any oil rigs, and let's not have any wind turbines, and let's keep the ocean as pristine. It's not very pristine now, but as pristine as we can make it. We got to clean up the plastic gyro. We got to do a lot of work.
Kinsella is my name. I used to sit on the Wainscott Citizens Advisory Committee, WCAC, charged as liaison to the trustees. Deepwater Wind is a great concern. Primarily, it's what we don't know about the project. It's very difficult for the trustees, it's very difficult for town board members, it's very difficult for the community to make an informed decision without being aware of the facts. How can we make a decision about a project if we don't know how much it's going to cost, for example? Deepwater Wind are trying to rush through an application. It's not a good sign that an application is being rushed through. It's a sign that they want to get it through without too many eyes having a look at the details. Of course, the details are very important. Principally, the price that Deepwater Wind have locked in per their purchase price agreement is an escalating price. It's probably around 22 cents per kilowatt hour, and there'll be a built-in increase each year, going up probably 3% a year, where the market price is going down in the opposite direction. So as the years progress, that spread will get wider and wider and wider until the very end of the very last year. The spread will be more than 10 times the price. So residents on South Fork will be paying 10 times the price for their wind-generated electricity than the market, or that other members or that other states will be paying for the same electricity. They're rushing through an application that doesn't even meet the basic requirements for the power we need during the summer months when we hit peak demand. When everyone has got their air conditioners on during the summer, they're drawing a lot more electricity. During the summer months is when the wind is blowing a lot less than when it is blowing during the winter months, and therefore there is a mismatch. The electricity will be generated during the winter when we need it in the summer. The battery storage facility that they're putting in is only designed to go for a maximum of 8 hours. maybe even 5 hours, I'm not quite sure, but it's a very small amount to tide over when the wind isn't blowing, when the blades aren't turning and there's no electricity coming out of the system. The rated capacity for the South Fork wind farm will generate only 34 megawatts. The gap, or the shortfall, that we are being told the wind farm is built to fill is 75 megawatts. So we'll still need to use the diesel generators to generate the extra 41 megawatts. The power constraints on the South Fork are very real. I think out to Montauk you've got a 23 kilovolt cable, or it might be a 25 kilovolt cable, which can't carry a lot of electricity. Or from the Shinnecock Canal to the Buell substation, it's only 69 kilovolts. Again, it can't carry a lot of electricity. So they've got to generate the electricity, or have a source of electricity, out here on the South Fork. The wind farm, however, won't be able to generate that amount of electricity. Again, we haven't been told the full details. We've been told that it's a 90 megawatt wind farm. We were never told that a 90 megawatt wind farm will only actually generate 34 megawatts, 34.2 megawatts. I've written many letters to the town board and to the town trustees. The town trustees have been very responsive. They're a responsible group of people. I'd never hear back from the town board, principally Peter Van Scoyak, Kathy Burke-Gonzalez and Sylvia Overby. I don't know why they remain silent on this issue. I've never got a reply to this report and a reply to the many questions that I've asked. Again, I wrote another letter on April 2nd to the town board, posing questions about about the price. You can see that the spread, the bottom blue line is the decrease price in the market of wind-generated electricity. The red line is the probable fixed-in price for the purchase price agreement. The problem is we've not been told what that price is per the purchase price agreement, and that needs to be revealed. Again, I wrote a further letter on April 24th, clearly outlining that the total cost of the South Fork wind farm is $1.6 billion, over $1.6 billion, per the New York State Office of the Comptroller. Again, when an organisation is considering spending 1.6, it should be sure of itself. It should know what is involved. It should know the economic impact. It should know the impact on the environment. But all this information we've not been privy to. If the town votes or grants an easement for the South Fork wind farm without first asking these basic questions, it will be endorsing a $1.6 billion project without even having a cursory look at the details. I wouldn't like to be a town board member voting for this coming into an election in 2019.